For the first time in more than 5.5 years, we finally tonight have a few new answers to a question that has loomed over Indiana and over the town of Delphi. Who killed Abby Williams and Libby German?
The end of the bridge you got to go through. Now, I believe that the bodies were found about 50.
Born from a family's grief and determination. In April of 2020, Army soldier Vanessa Guillen went missing while stationed at one of the largest military installations.
You get that little music in the background that goes, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious."
Right.
Knew about it or was there. He's as guilty as the person who committed it.
Chilling details in the arrest of a suspected serial killer caught before he could strike again.
They dropped the ball, man. Like they said, he went AWOL, and that he was a deserter, and nobody went to look for him.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder.
Like I said, we're going back. We were asked last time to kind of talk about the food, the grub truck video, and kind of give our perspective of it. The press release from the police department, it indicated that they're still trying to put pieces together from that night. Does that worry you at any point or at any bit that they're still trying to put those pieces together?
It's been over 5 weeks since little Kaylee Anthony vanished. Her mother, Casey, has been arrested for lying to police. She's being held without bail.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show, your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about, or we're going back into our conversation going back into the Bryan Kohberger case, starting over, so to speak, and we're going to be going through the white Elantra and basically the homicide updates that Moscow Police Department were releasing, and see if there was any inconsistencies with what they were saying back then with what we know now. You know, there's a lot of people that have said a lot of different things, like from, you know, the time that the incident occurred was between 3 and 4 a.m. You know, we're going to look at when was that declared, and, you know, when was that changed? When were some people suspects and when weren't they suspects? Things like that. I hope all that makes sense. But without further ado, let me know in the live chat if you guys can hear me all right. Also, if you're watching this, let's hit that like button. Let's get that going. Let's get this out and about. So without further ado, let's get into this. So, unfortunately, the Moscow Police Department, they took down, or their website, they took down the area where you can see all the press releases and everything out. Now, they're still available going through the internet and finding one PDF after another. And it took me a while, but I found, I want to say, majority of them. And I put them in order to the best of my ability. And we'll go through them, we'll read them. And you guys let me know if we'll talk about it. All right. So this says here, this is from November 18th, 2022. It says, Moscow, Idaho, the city of Moscow Police Department is providing the following information to update the public on the known facts surrounding the 4 murders that occurred on November 13th in Moscow, Idaho. On the evening of November 12th, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen were at a local bar called the Corner Club. Between 10 and 1:30 a.m. November 13th at approximately 1:40 a.m., Kaylee and Madison were seen on a video at a local food vendor called the Grub Truck. They used a private party for a ride home, and they arrived at their residence at 1:45 a.m. Investigators have determined that Ethan and Xana Kernodle were seen at the Sigma Chi house. At approximately 1:45 a.m., Ethan and Xana are believed to have returned to the residence. Now, right there, we have two sets of individuals that went out in two separate places. They put that they both arrived, at the same time, or approximately. And what that tells me is they're not being very accurate. They're being purposefully vague. And because what are the chances that they both arrive at the exact same time from two different places and they not be coordinated? You know what I mean? So let's continue this. It was previously reported that Ethan resided at the home. However, it's been determined that he was only visiting. Two other roommates were at the residence that night. November 13th, 11:58 a.m., officers responded to the residence after a 911 call reported an unconscious individual. Officers discovered Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan deceased in the residence. Autopsies were conducted November 17th, so this is the day after the autopsies. Coroner confirmed the identity and their cause and manner of death of homicide by stabbing. Coroner stated that it is likely that all four victims were likely asleep. Some had defensive wounds. Each was stabbed multiple times. Now, for them to come out there and say that they were likely asleep, there's probably reason for that. Now, we know that there was a latent footprint, in the area where, in front of Dylan's bedroom door. Latent meaning that it wasn't really visible, right? And they had to use amino black to bring it up, but they had to test for it. I think we had retired CSI investigator Steve on the show not too long ago, and we talked about that footprint, and he said there would have been a presumptive test or blood presumptive test being conducted and things like that to determine if it was blood before they would have just thrown the amino acid on it or the amino black on it. And so I'm not familiar with the entire process. I'm not a CSI investigator like himself, but he said that there was a process for that. But, from what I understand is that the scenes were contained to the bedrooms. And if that ends up being the case, you're not seeing signs of a struggle in the kitchen or on the stairs or blood anywhere in the stairs, in the kitchen, in the living room, in the bathrooms, and it's just contained there, then you would expect that, the victims probably were in their bedroom when they were attacked. All right. Now, if none of them have any type of DNA or anything like that under their fingernails or on their knuckles, there's no hair or anything like that, on the bodies, then one would believe that there wasn't much of a struggle. Now, defensive wounds can be anything from, having DNA under the fingernails from scratching and clawing back at an assailant. But it also could be just as, merely as just putting their arms in the way like such, and then getting, markings. So it doesn't specify what kind of defensive wounds they are. So we shouldn't probably, jump to conclusions on that. Yeah, and I just said the defensive wounds can be anything from, grabbing the knife. If somebody grabbed the knife and their hand got cut, that would be considered a defensive wound. A defensive wound doesn't necessarily mean that the person getting attacked actually hit or struck the person that is attacking them. It just means that they made moves that were considered defensive. Blocking would be considered defensive. And so let's continue. There was no sign of sexual assault. Detectives do not believe that the two surviving roommates, the male in the grub truck video, are involved. Online reports of victims being tied and gagged are not accurate. The identity of the 911 caller has not been released. Detectives seized contents of 3 dumpsters on King Road to locate possible evidence. Detectives have contacted local businesses to determine if a fixed blade knife has been recently purchased. So again, right away, they're looking for a fixed blade knife. So they had the knife sheath, so they were aware of that at this time. Right now it says that at this time, released detectives have received nearly 500 tips, which are being processed, investigated, and cleared. 38 interviews have been conducted with individuals who may have informed information about the murders. So this is just a few days after the murders have occurred. Thank you, Canadian True Crime Buff. We appreciate you. You're amazing. Coming in with 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. Make sure you guys have your gifts on for that. And hit that like and subscribe button again. Let's do that. Here, I need to put this up. All right. All right, so that was November 18th. This is the next day on November 19th. There's a clarification. So the update at 8:28 p.m. So this is updated the next day, but very late in the evening. It says the cell phone used to call 911 belonged to one of the roommates. Due to the ongoing investigation, the identity of the caller has not been released. Moscow Department is providing the following information. So this is the updated information as well. It says, at this time, detectives investigated the private party driver who took Kaylee and Madison home on November 13th and do not believe he is involved in this crime. Detectives believe that on November 12th, the two surviving roommates had been out in the Moscow community separately, but returned home by 1 a.m. The two did not wake up until later, November 13th. Now, they don't say exactly when on November 13th, just later. So it's not necessarily a line. It's not necessarily saying that they slept through the attacks. You know what I'm saying? I think that at the time, and I everybody, including myself, is probably guilty of this. And you're getting all this information coming in so quickly, and you're trying to get it out so fast. Sometimes we read things one way, and then it's really not what it meant. You get what I'm saying? And so it doesn't say that they slept through it. Now, maybe it does say it somewhere else, and I'm just not seeing that. But I haven't seen where it says that they slept through it. One second. All right. Initially, the 911 call made at 11:58 a.m. on November 13th requested aid for an unconscious person. The call was made from inside the residence on one of the roommates' cell phone. Moscow Police Department arrived shortly after there and found all four victims. Moscow detectives are seeking help from the residents and businesses within the area west of Taylor Avenue, west of Paulus River Drive, Highway 95 to Highway 95 South, and back to the Botanical Garden for video surveillance between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Now, I know a lot of folks were saying that there was, the original timeline was 3 to 4, 3 to 4. That's what they're saying, 3 to 4. Well, where did this 3 to 4 come from? Right? And it did come from somewhere. It's not real. This is from the AP. Officials of 4 slain University of Idaho students are victims. This was at 10:14, November 14th, 2022. So this is just one day after the murders had occurred. And it says here that, let's see if I can find it real quick. Police Captain Anthony Dollinger told the Idaho Statement that night that one of the deceased students are believed to be responsible. Wait, what? Moscow Police Captain Anthony Dollinger told the Idaho Statements Monday night that none of the deceased students are believed to be responsible for the deaths. The students likely died between 3 and 4 a.m., but weren't discovered for hours, Burtege said. Now, Burtege is the mayor. Mayor had a press conference, and this is where this 3 to 4 came from. Mayor had a press conference where he said that the incident most likely had occurred between 3 and 4 a.m., and this was the day after the incident. So I know they had recovered video, but they haven't gotten all the video yet. I know that there's this weird, big misconception that is out there that when police walked into the scene, that on the table was all the evidence, all the videos, Bryan Kohberger's name, the DNA, everything right there planned for them, and they just decided to wait 7 weeks to do something with it. It's not how it happened. They found things out little piece by piece and investigated piece by piece. So on, one day after the incident, what do you have? You have a white vehicle that's driving around pretty weird at around 3:26, and that they can probably tell from the next door neighbor's camera. All right. And it stops driving around 4. And then at 4:20, it's seen, heading out of there. So, that's not too off between 3 and 4 a.m. Now, this is the mayor. He's not an investigator. He's not a detective. none of those type of things. So what information could he have possibly gotten? He probably did go talk to, one of the captains of investigation or even the chief of police. And they probably told him something to the effect that, yeah, we got something, one of the victims is, has an ex-boyfriend that lives down the street. And, they were seen together earlier that day and she was calling him a few times. And, we think he's, this could be a crime of passion. And, we have this white car traveling around between 3 and 4-ish in the morning. And so when he goes and talks to the press and he says something to that effect, like, yeah, it's a crime of passion, 3 and 4 a.m. They quickly walk that back, and they walk back a lot of things. And that's sometimes normal in a case, especially when there's one that maybe perhaps, until you get a suspect, the evidence that's there is not a lot. There may not be a lot of evidence at the crime scene. What do we know? We know that they used the DNA on the sheath, not the DNA off of anybody's nails or hair or anything like that. So that leads me to believe that if, those things were there, they would have used them. So, being able to deduce and go through deduction there, you can deduce that it didn't exist. All right. And so once you get a suspect, then you can work backwards from him and you can get all sorts of evidence. But at this point, one day into it, I'm not sure how much information a mayor would actually know. You know what I mean? So I just kind of wanted to point that out in this situation. But they are looking for, surveillance between 3 and 6 a.m. And this is as early as November 19th. All right. They had, at this point, they had 4 detectives. Oh, this is how many people they just had on staff. But FBI had 22 investigators in Moscow at this point, 20 agents located outside of Moscow, and 2 behavioral analysis unit agents as well. All right, so let's go to the next day or the next one. This is November 22nd. All right, this is the updated information. This is just basically saying this first highlighted spot is talking about the website where you can pull up all of these press conferences. Unfortunately, you click on it, it says no longer exists. Yeah, this is where they talk about a stalker. It says investigators have looked into Kaylee Goncalves having a stalker. I have not been able to verify or identify the stalker. And there's an update on the weapon. That says that there's been much conversation about the terminology used to describe the weapon. The type of knife thought to be used in the attack is believed to be a fixed-bladed knife. Detectives continue to look for that weapon. So, really not saying anything as far as an update there. Here it says detectives believe that on November 12th, the 2 surviving roommates had also been out of Moscow community separately, but returned to the home by 1 a.m. The 2 did not wake up till later that morning. So again, nothing saying that they slept through, the incident. It says on November 13th, 11:58 a.m., a 911 call requested aid for an unconscious person. They originated from inside the residence, one of the surviving roommates' cell phones. So we already know that. We are still talking about the 3 to 6 a.m. time frame and an area. They were looking for a vehicle. This is still fairly early on in the investigation, and here they're asking for video or any observations of suspicious behavior the night of November 12th into the early hours of November 13th, while Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen were in the downtown Moscow, and when Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle were at the Sigma Chi house. Anyone who observes suspicious behavior near those areas or has video surveillance are asked to submit their tips. So at this time, this is who have been not necessarily cleared, but who detectives believe are not involved in the crime. The 2 surviving roommates, the male in the grub truck surveillance video or the private driver who took Kaylee and Madison home on November 13th. Now, I know a lot of people at the time were bringing up, or a little bit later maybe, a lot of people were bringing up that they didn't clear the DoorDasher. Well, they didn't have to bring out that there was a DoorDasher because that information was still, for the most part, private. I don't think anybody knew about that. So if they would have put that out in some sort of presser, then that would have been divulging information that, nobody else had or should have needed, right? So let's see. So those are the only three that have been cleared at this time. So the male in the grub truck surveillance video, this is going to be who everybody suspects was Jack Showalter. He got cleared pretty quickly. Maybe perhaps there's some sort of video or surveillance of him somewhere else during 3/26 and 4/20. Know what I'm saying? Mikey coming in with his 11th month membership. What's up, my man? He's like catching up, hiding, and boss is lurking. Listen, don't get in trouble, my man. Don't get in trouble. Welcome. It's good to see you. All right, so it says here, the identity of the 911 caller has not been released. Investigators are aware of multiple phone calls from Madison to Kaylee to a male. So that person hasn't been cleared. So Jack DeCour is still suspect at this time, or at least not believed to not be possibly involved. It says here, victims being tied and gagged are not accurate. Detective sees contents of dumpsters on King Road to locate possible evidence. Now, I know that, there's been some talk about perhaps somebody found a black coat out of a dumpster and that it was possibly Madison's. I don't know how true that is. I know that there was some sort of black piece of clothing that they were looking at. However, if it was involved and it didn't lead to anybody, his arrest, maybe they just found it outside. I mean, how would that end up on Bryan Kohberger's probable cause affidavit if it didn't point to him? Even though whoever may have thrown it, if it even is involved, it's very well possible that it had nothing to do with the case. Well, somebody else that was visiting the area and dropped it or something. But if it was involved, if it doesn't, point to Bryan Kohberger, if it doesn't exonerate him, we're not going to know in the probable cause affidavit. We're not going to know everything that they picked up. Now, is it going to be logged in on evidence and the prosecution and the defense team have, that in the file? Yeah, it should be. It should be there. Currently, no suspects in custody and no weapon has been located. All right. So this here also talks about the dog. It says, on the morning of the incident, officers located a dog at the residence. The dog was unharmed and turned over to animal services, then released to a responsible party. So out of that sentence, the theory that, this person did something with the dog, or this person was a dog lover, or I don't know what, started coming out just because nothing happened to the dog. So it says here, detectives are aware of an incident of a report of a skin dog and have determined it to be unrelated to this incident. So that was a different, separate situation that had occurred. Now they have 600 tips and that they're all investigating at this point. This is the next day, 11/23. So this is 10 days after the murders. And this is at 6:30 p.m. So after the day is ended, it says updated information. At this time, the investigation detectives do not believe that the male Kaylee and Madison attempted to contact numerous times on November 13th is involved in this crime. So it took them 10 days to clear this guy. So they put him through the rigor during that time. It wasn't just like, hey, you're the ex-boyfriend. We'll talk to you for a few minutes and then, we'll swab you and we'll see you later. Nah. From what I understand, when I was talking with Kaylee Goncalves, who, very close with Jack DeCour, that first day, he walked over, like, we've said this multiple times. He was awoken by his roommate, said, hey, something's happened down the street. He walks over there up the street, and he sees officers there. He walks up to an officer, asks what happened. He identifies himself as an ex-boyfriend to somebody that lives in the house, and they tell him that he needs to go with them and escort him down to the police station, where they, from what I understand, is he was, answering questions from then, which was, well, let's see. It was after 12 o'clock because police were already there. And it was before 1:30 because that's when Christy said she attempted to make contact with people. That's when she found out that it was possible that her daughter had passed, and she began to contact, Kaylee and her friends, Maddie, Jack DeCourt, and so on, and couldn't get anybody to answer. And she said that at that time he was already being questioned. So anywhere between 12 and 1:30 is around the time he went to the police station. He didn't get out till almost 11, I believe, is what I heard. So he was in there for quite a while, 10 hours the first day. He went back a few times. He had handed over his phone. They forensically went through it. He did the DNA stuff. They checked him. He took the pictures. They checked his body for any scratches or bruises or anything that would indicate that he was involved in an altercation. And there's nothing there. I know that the victims perhaps didn't, maybe didn't scratch or hit him back because there's no evidence of that. But to kill 4 people in the manner that were lost takes quite a bit of, physical ability. I mean, that's going to take a toll on the body. The person should be sore, red in areas, things like that. So if those things didn't show up, don't seem like he's in an altercation. He's moving fine, fluid. It's unlikely that he was the person. So it took him 10 days to clear the guy. Now, 6:30 p.m. I find that interesting that they did it that night. Tells me that, they probably found something, or something came back clearing him that day at some time or around that time, and they put it out there, after 5 o'clock, obviously. And it was probably the DNA on the knife sheath didn't come back as a match to him. That's what I'm assuming. So let's see. Let's continue this. Kaylee mentioned having a stalker, but detectives have made unable to corroborate that statement. Investigators are requesting anyone with information about a potential stalker or unusual instances to have contacted the tip line. So I talked to Christy about this so-called stalker. She informed me what had happened. It was Kaylee and Bethany. They were out at a grocery store, and they were buying drinks for the evening, and that they noticed somebody had followed them from inside the store, outside the store. And when they got to their car, the guy just kind of turned around and walked away. Now, they kind of freaked them out because they saw him in the store, I think, in a couple of different areas while they were getting the drinks. Then they saw him when they walked out. It was two guys that were following them, or supposedly following them. But it was a one-off situation. They never contacted or bothered Kaylee or Madison before. What they said was basically they were trying to get the phone number, but didn't have the nerve to actually walk up. Is basically what it was. And I'll say that based on the description that that Christy gave to me about these two guys, neither one of them would fit the vague description that Dylan Mortenson gave about who was in the house that night. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but they didn't. These people didn't fit the description. So we'll continue. I know that at one point they say something different, but I'm not sure if it's here. No, it's not. All right, I'm going to start closing some of these real quick. That way I don't get confused. All right, November 27th. So this is about another 3 days later. It talks about, people that have uploaded 488 digital media submissions to the FBI link. They're talking about the University of Idaho is going to be hosting a candlelight vigil on Wednesday, November 30th, to honor in memory of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee. They go on to say that they no time at this time there still hasn't been suspects. Updated investigation on the evening on the 12th. Kaylee and Maddie were at a local bar called the Corner Club between 10 and 1:30 a.m. November 13th. At approximately 1:40, Kaylee and Maddie were seen at a local vendor at a grub truck and used a private party for a ride home downtown and arrived at their King Road residence at 1:56 a.m. Arrival time has been updated based on digital evidence collected by investigators. So this is when they changed the time from 1:45 to 1:56. All right, so let's see. Again, still using that 3 to 6 a.m., not 3 to 4. November 30th. It says here there's a clarification. The Moscow Police Department is providing the following information to update the public on known facts surrounding the 4 murders that occurred on November 13th. Clarification at 7:15 p.m. Conflicting information has been released over the past 24 hours. Latah County Prosecutor Office stated that suspects specifically looked at this residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. We have spoken with the Latah County Prosecutor's Office and identified this was a miscommunication. Detectives do not currently know if the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted, but continue to investigate. So they walk that back. And like I said, I've said it multiple times. You follow the evidence, right? If your evidence is pointing in one direction, you follow it. Now, if the evidence starts to point somewhere else and you continue to go in that one other narrative, then you're not following the evidence, right? They had evidence that, there was a boyfriend that was broken up down the street, was there with them at the corner club. They called him, I don't know how many times. That's usually what it is. When you usually have a murder, that's usually, 9 out of 10 times a person knows the person that took their life, unless it's some sort of like, robbery gone wrong or gang-related incident. But even in those, most of the time they know who the other person is. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So this is when they walked back that it was targeted. And, they say basically they don't know if it's the residents or occupants. Now, I think they're also going to say that they think that it could be the residents in this statement as well. And which is kind of like what I've been saying. I've been thinking that it's the residence was the target. Now, obviously, he probably investigated the girls and watched them and things like that. But I feel like this was a thrill kill. I think that this was a situation where he wanted to create, a high profile crime as well. And when you have a situation where, this guy wants to know what it feels like to take somebody's life and, at the same time, create something that's huge. You go for multiple victims. You go for a house with a lot of people. A house with a lot of people also makes sense because there's a lot of DNA that goes back and forth. A lot of people are going back and forth through there. A college dorm has parties and, the DNA and stuff like that. When you look at the bloody footprint they found, it was a Vans shoe. That's a common footprint in college or amongst college students, male and female. You know what I'm saying? So, it was very easy for him to hide his presence in a house like that if, the correct precautions were taken. Here they talk about the September 12, 2022 incident regarding an argument between a group of people walking on the Idaho back path. And there was a confrontation, and a cyclist displayed a folding knife. I was not involved. And let's see. Update investigation. It's just the arrival time again. All right. This is December 1st, 2022. So here it says detectives are aware of the 6th person listed on the lease of the residence, but do not believe that individual was present during the incident. Idaho State Police Forensic Crime Lab scientists have worked on this case for weeks and have provided testing and analysis results to detectives. As they complete additional tests, those results will be provided to protect the investigation's integrity. So here, it's the first time they talk about Idaho State Police Forensic Lab working on additional tests on analysis. So wait, let's read this again. So it's Idaho State Police Forensic Crime Lab. Scientists have worked on this case for weeks. So this is December 1st. Crime happened November 13th. So it's probably been like, 2.5 weeks? Maybe 3. So they've been working the entire time. Means they found the DNA probably day 1. They probably expedited, or day 2. They probably expedited that knife to the Idaho State Lab day 1. And first day that they got in their lab, they probably discovered the STR profile, or discovered the DNA and created the STR profile. So, this is the first time they talk about it, and they talk about some of the tests that they're doing. It says, we remain consistent in our belief that this was a targeted attack, but investigators have not concluded if the target was the residents or the occupants. Like I said, I think it was more so the residents. I mean, if it was one of the persons, and you're looking at somebody that went through three people to get to one, I don't know, it sounds like a lot of rage, and there's no evidence of rage. As far as like there's audio, and you don't hear anything being broken, you don't hear anybody screaming, you don't hear the sounds of rage. Somebody that mad that's going to go through some, 3 people to get to one, are they really going to drive around 3 times before they park? It's those type of things that just kind of don't make sense with that. So to me, I think it was more of a, a thrill type of situation. Detectives believe that the November 12th, 2 surviving roommates had also been out of Moscow separately, but returned home by 1 a.m. As just as the 2 did not wake up until later that morning. So again, nothing ever says that they slept through it per se. You know what I mean? Santa's looking down the wrong chimney. What does that mean? All right, let's see. Was there? All right, so here they've cleared some more people. This is the 2 surviving roommates, the male at the grub truck video, the private party, the male that Kaylee called numerous times, and any individual at the residence when 911 was called. So it took a while for them to clear those guys. They cleared Jack Decor first, and then they cleared everybody that was there at the residence on the 911 call. Well, let me rephrase it. They cleared the roommates first, and then they cleared Jack, and then they cleared, anybody that was there when the 911 call was made. I know they also cleared the grub truck guy and the private party driver, but those guys aren't really, close to the case, so to speak. They just, they saw them there. They weren't involved, and or were suspects probably at any point. But that just tells you that, this is also December what? 1st. So a couple of weeks later, that's how long it kind of took for them to clear these guys. So, like, again, that's how long it took for them to clear those guys. Do you guys really think that they had, Bryan Kohberger on the clock here? I mean, by this time they supposedly had his, his vehicle and his number and his name and everything else to investigate him, for a couple of days now. So, at this point, they're moving on from just these guys. This is going to be on 12/5. This is about 4 days later. It says there have been statements speculating about the case, victims' injuries, cause of death, evidence collection and processing, and the investigative techniques. With active criminal investigation, law enforcement has not released additional facts to the family or the public. So, that kind of jives everything that Christy told me, that the police really weren't telling them anything. They had to hire a private eye and things like that and do their own investigation to get a lot of the information that they know. We recognize the frustration in this case, and the speculation proliferates in the absence of facts. However, we firmly believe speculation and unvetted information is a disservice to the victims, their families, and the community. 100% agree. Detectives continue to investigate what occurred at approximately 9 p.m. on November 12th to 1:45 a.m. November 13th, when Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle were believed to have been at the Sigma Chi house. So this is where I think that the thought of there being an actual fight was there. I know that Xana's mother had stated something to the effect that she knew, or she had been told, that there was a fight there between Ethan and somebody else, and she had to break it up. That's possible. I mean, that could be what they're talking about here. Now, I think that when it comes to that, all right, that could lead to a motive. All right, do they have the opportunity, the frat persons, right? Because supposedly this was over Ethan making fun of him about being on steroids or something like that, right? So the drug of choice is steroids. The habit of that he's being accused of displaying is roid rage. Again, there's that word rage, and that's the reason why this occurred. So the next one is his means. Did he have the means to commit this crime? Which, let's figure out. Like, if he was drunk, right? He was mad, willing to get in a fight with a lot of people in front of him. And he was roid raging. Was he capable of going into a house, committing the 4 perfect murders without leaving any DNA behind, do it silently and stealthily, drive an Elantra or another vehicle that nobody can find anymore around in circles before they get off and display their rage? It's not jiving. It's not making sense. You know what I mean? So I get that there may have been an issue there, but just because there was an issue there doesn't mean that that situation turned into a much worse situation. Hope that makes sense. All right. All right, so it says, using tips and leads, investigators have identified an incident involving Kaylee at a local business, which may have been the stalker reference she made to friends and family. In mid-October, 2 males were seen inside a local business. They parted ways, and one male appeared to follow Kaylee inside the business as she exited to walk toward her car. The male turned away, and it did not appear he made contact with her. Detectives contacted both males and learned that the two were attempting to meet women at the business. This was corroborated through additional investigation. Based on available information, detectives believe that this is an isolated incident and not an ongoing pattern in stalking. So this is where they've finally cleared that issue, and they still don't have a suspect at this time. This is where it gets a little bit interesting, because this is the first time also. Now, what day is this? This is December 5th. Under investigation timeline, it states, on November 13th, the surviving roommates summoned friends up to the residence because they believed one of the second-floor victims had passed out and was not waking up. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call requested aid for an unconscious person. The call was made from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones inside the residence. Multiple people talked on with the 911 dispatcher before Moscow police arrived at the location. Officers entered the residence and found 2 victims on the second floor and 2 victims on the third. So they explain here, why it was an unconscious person, because the roommates believed one of the second floor victims had passed out. Now, what we know is, or what I've been told at least from Kaylee Goncalves, is that Ethan's best friend is the person that called 911, that they were attempting to make entry through the door, but it was blocked. He said that at one point he was able to see, get his head in and see what happened, and that's when 911 was called. I wouldn't be surprised if, as he was trying to open the door, somebody wasn't on the phone with 911 saying that, we can't get a hold of them. They're not answering the phone, not answering, calls, and they're not, we can't open the door. There's somebody on the floor, and that might be why it was an unconscious person, which is crazy if we go back all the way back to when November, maybe 15th. I think that's what I had exactly said. It was like 2 or 3 days after the incident. I said, I feel like maybe perhaps there was something blocking the door, and they were able to look underneath and see something. I even brought up that, that house was built in the 70s. If you look inside, the flooring had obviously been remodeled and redone. And I would assume that back in the 70s, you probably had more houses that were carpeted. If those were the original doors, or were doors when there was carpet, then there's probably a little bit of a gap there between the flooring and the door, and they may have been able to see something of somebody on the floor. Maybe not the entire scene, but something, and maybe the door was blocked there, and that's why it came in as an unconscious person. I gotta tell you guys, I mean, I could trick people into thinking I'm psychic. I swear. All right, let's continue. So it still says here the Idaho State Lab, our forensic lab, is still working on the case. All right, let's close this one. Let me see. I'm gonna go through some of these comments real quick. I've been kind of just going straight through this without looking at the comment section too much. If you guys have a question or anything like that, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to see, and so I'm going to need to, some stars and stuff, or I'll be honest with you, the colors are the ones that kind of catch my eye. And the past court motion, I'm not sure what that means. Does anyone know if Jack Showalter posted the comment about the wrong driver was arrested? I've never even heard this. This is where send me where that came from. I'd be interested in knowing. Let's see. Do you actually believe that someone in the FBI had Kohberger's DNA on a sheath in their back pocket, waiting for a day to frame him because he worked at WSU? Here's the other thing. If Bryan Kohberger is innocent, right? Let's just say he is. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Do you think that the glove wearing and the germ cleaning and the spraying and germophobia stuff that he displayed, that were what we've heard, the glove stuff, do you think that happened coincidentally when the murders happened, or do you think that would have been a habit that he'd had before, since it wasn't connected to the murders? If he was innocent, I would assume that was a habit prior to the murders. If police couldn't get his DNA, and they tried for what, they got there the 24th, they finally just used his dad's on the 27th. So for 3 days, they were trying to pull his DNA, and they couldn't get his DNA for 3 days because his gloves and everything else. And somehow we're supposed to believe that he shook hands with the killer, or he touched something over here, touched something over there when he was wearing gloves and doing all these things. And you can't have it both ways. You know what I'm saying? All right. So, let's see. Anybody think I'm one side, I'm neutral? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, even if you think he's innocent or anything like that, everybody has a right to their opinion. Me, I just find some things hard to believe. Some of these things that have come out. Not everything is obviously super bad or super out there. There are some questions that have come up that I could go, the PCA was written pretty poorly, in my opinion. I've been saying that since the start, since it came out. That affidavit was written really bad. Now, let's see. Did the same driver take him to the corner club to start with? Christy made a comment in an interview that the same ride they took also brought them home or something to that effect. I'll ask her. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll ask her. Now, last time I spoke to her was after the trial or the hearing the other day, or a couple of weeks ago, where they didn't give a trial date and it's expected to be so long away. BK didn't do it. Okay. I mean, that's just your opinion. There ain't nothing wrong with that. But who do you think did it? Who do you think did it? Let me see. Let me go back. Who is Turok Steelhawk? That's a cool name. Who do you think did it? I'm just curious. I deal in facts. Okay. Oh, no problem. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just curious. Who do you think did it? Yes, exactly. We all have our opinions. This hasn't gone to trial, right? And I think that it's probably, morally in the best interest of, to be moral, to keep things based in sanity, like that whole dot stuff, right? Where you had that 40-year-old lady claiming to be 21, saying all this craziness like that, and you clearly know it's fake, and you still continue to spew that. That's a problem. You know what I mean? That's a problem. But to say, I want to, wait to trial and see what all the, all the actual evidence is before I make my decision, that's probably the best thing to do. All right. And you're supposed to stay open about those things. Me personally, I don't live in Idaho, so I know I'm not going to be on the jury anytime soon, at least up there. I think I have a right to my opinion as well. Now, I've also said that I won't put out there that I think he's 100% guilty. In fact, I've never said that. I'll put out there that I think he did it. But until we know, and get a conviction, then that'll determine whether or not he's 100% guilty or not. You can have somebody like O.J. Simpson, where I think he did it, but he's not guilty in that situation. And there's nothing I can do about that. He's been acquitted. You know what I mean? So, and that's just facts. Those are facts. You know what I'm saying? All right. So, juvenile nonsense like Kohberger does not indicate one is open to reasoned discussion. Block those types. Well, Gene, I don't think you understand what I think or what I call a Kohberger. A Kohberger is somebody that no matter what, Bryan Kohberger is 100% innocent. There is no world that resides where he could have possibly done this, and that anybody else could have. The chief of police could have done it. The roommates could have done it. The FBI had to frame him with the help of Pennsylvania and all these other things. Like that kind of nonsense. That's what a Kohberger is. Just because you merely think that there's a possibility he could be innocent or those type of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Clearly, you haven't really watched the show much. I'd encourage you to do so. I do care about this case. I've talked to the victims' families and have expressed extreme care about what they want and their needs and how they want to be, the memory of their daughter goes forward and stuff like that. And so I care about the case quite a bit. I'm interested in your facts. Oh, yes, I got that, Mark. I'm going to bring that up here in a minute when we get to that part. Well, that's the part where we're at. We're now looking at, wait one second. I know one thing for sure, Murphy didn't do it. Yeah. I appreciate that too. Daniel has a good way of looking at things. I try to look at things from a multiple levels, right? I mean, it has to fit all the boxes. I can just process information fairly quickly. It's kind of like chess, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with chess, but when you play chess, you play and you predict, a couple of moves. And it's not so much you're predicting the moves, it's what moves are best to be made. And, if you can memorize all the chess moves, you can force people into doing things that you want them to do by looking ahead 3 or 4 spaces ahead. I'm not saying I can do that with this. What I'm saying is that if you give me one piece of evidence, I can look at 4 or 5 different parts of the case to see if it fits. All right. If somebody tells me that, for instance, a fraternity person may have committed it, and they told me the reason why was because of this fight that they had there, and that answers a question, the why question. Why did this happen? Okay, there was a fight. This person made fun of that guy. But does it fit the other boxes? Does it fit that this person was driving a white Elantra multiple times and he be raging? Does it fit that, this person could, is possibly drunk, raging, and, doesn't leave DNA? And then you have the fact that you have these guys from Sigma Chi that go to the University of Idaho, have no connection to Bryan Kohberger, and by Bryan Kohberger's own defense team stating that there's no connection between himself and the victims. Well, Ethan Chapin's a victim and he was part of Sigma Chi. So if Bryan Kohberger had a connection to one of his Sigma Chi brothers, they're literally his roommates. I'm fairly positive that's considered a connection. So, how did they get his DNA if there's no connection and he's wearing gloves all the time? So, you got to look at it from more than one angle. It's like 5 or 6 different angles to decide whether or not this is plausible or feasible or downright impossible. You know what I'm saying? All right, so let's continue this. This is going to be December 7th. This is the big day. This is the day they bring out and talk about the white Elantra, right? Let's see. Moscow police are asking the community's help. Detectives are interested in speaking with the occupants of a white 2011-2013 Hyundai Elantra with an unknown license plate. Tips and leads have led to investigators to look for additional information about a vehicle being in the immediate area during the King Street residence during the early morning hours, November 13th. Again, I don't think they ever limit it to between 3 and 4. Not here, at least. And so here they show a picture of what a white Elantra looks like. And it says here that below are stock images of a 2011-13 Hyundai Elantra. And they are not the actual vehicle. A lot of people ask, why not use the picture of the Elantra? All right, so this is 4 weeks into it. At this point, it appears that they probably got video from the neighborhood. And I got some videos that we're going to watch after this as well. They're going to kind of align with this timeline as well. But at this point, the videos that they have are probably of a vehicle profile. You're looking at, ring cam footage and stuff like that are facing from the front door towards the street. And typically when your camera is facing from the front door towards the street, you're going to capture the side profile view of vehicles, which is why the license plate could be unknown, amongst other reasons, and why they have limited to a 2011 to 13 Elantra instead of something, all the way up to 16. All right. So this is the press release. This is the 7th. Well, fast forward to the 19th. Now, we know on the 19th that the IGG came back based on the New York Times article, Hunt for a Killer, I think is what it was called. It was like page, I want to say like 7 or so. Underneath, there's a picture. I think it was like yellow and red. That's what I remember. Under there, it'll say that the IGG results came back December 19th. So this is December 19th. This is what was released. It states here that a number of tips and leads have come in as a part of the investigation has hit the 10,000 mark. So, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I hope I didn't hurt anybody's ears. The number in tips and leads. So this is the 10,000 mark, right? 10,000 mark. And That's a lot of tips, man. That's a lot of things to go through. I know a lot of folks are saying that, hey, they should have found him sooner, or they had his name and November 25th, November 29th. Things take time. All right, let's continue this. Progress continues to be made in finding information about the white 2011 and 13 Elantra in the immediate area of the King Road residence during the early morning hours of November 13th. Investigators continue to believe the occupants of this vehicle may have critical information to share regarding this case. At this time, no suspect has been identified. Now, here on this situation here, I feel that this was prepared either in the morning of the 19th or in the evening of the 18th, because they have a video. I'll see if I can find it real quick. Shouldn't be hard.
Where are we at with the number of tips that have come in and leads?
We've had right around 10,000 tips come in. We're reviewing all those tips.
So this is the YouTube video that coincides with this press break release. And this was for immediate release, December 19th. So this was either that morning in the morning hours, I believe, because I remember seeing this and going over it. This was early. So I think this is actually before they got word of Bryan Kohberger's name. I think that name came throughout sometime in the day of December 19th. And, one reason why you look at Fry's face. All right. This is the day before that they find out his name, or the day of. In my opinion, I think this is before.
We're checking to ensure that we...
I'm going to mute him real quick. Stress. Look at his eyebrows. Don't look, he looks sad. Like he looks stressed out to me. Looks tired. Look at the bags under his eyes. Right? Exhausted. Yeah, let's go to the 20th. Just the next day. Look at his eyebrows. Look at that smile that he's trying not to come out. And if you hear his voice too.
Completion. We have a lot of resources that we're utilizing, but we still ask for your help. We ask for any tips that you might have, anything that you might be able to give us. We're going to take a look at those, but be assured that.
He looks relieved. The bags aren't there. Look at that. Look at the bags are starting to go away. This is just one day. So, a lot of people say that, it was earlier on, but when you have this, you can see literally on this guy's face that from the 19th to the 20th, he's different. The reports come in that on the 19th, that sometime throughout the day is when they got the name Bryan Kohberger from the IGG. And then you have the Airmail article that talks about how on this day, that he had a pregnant smile on his face. You can see it. This is when they knew who he was. This is when they knew. All right. So this whole thing about them hiding a witness. I mean, is there witnesses that they don't want, the prosecution doesn't want the public to know about yet? Probably. I can know of at least probably two that are. I know of two that are. But are they individuals that identified him before his arrest? I don't think so. I don't think that the information they had were before they got his name. I think the information they had on Mr. Kohberger was after December 20th, right here. The IGG takes 6 to 8 weeks to generate. Not necessarily. I asked the Gabriela Vargas, the defense's witness, on how long it can take. And it actually can take a lot sooner than that. She said that they've gotten matches the same day. Like the same day. And, it just depends on who enters their DNA into the deal there. And it also depends on, the equipment and the resources they have. I believe she had stated that the FBI has, more resources than what a private lab would have, or at least a private lab of the lab of her size. I don't know about a bigger lab if they've had more resources or things like that. But from what I understand is the FBI can work fairly quick. At the end of the day, the IGG only pointed in the direction of somebody. It didn't necessarily say that this person was guilty of anything. It just said that based on, the STR profile that was already created, there's a good chance that the person is either this guy or somebody closely related to this guy. Now, with that, that's not enough to arrest anybody. I mean, that's equivalent for me calling, the police and saying, hey, my Mustafa stole my TV. You go and arrest him or her. And there's no evidence whatsoever that you broke into my house or stole my TV. It's just my word. That's not going to work. That officer then has to go and create a case. He has to go and, discover surveillance cameras, see if your vehicle is in the area, things like that. Now, just me basically saying that or merely saying that isn't anything. And if the only reason that I thought that was because you commented on my YouTube show, do you think that even if, do you think that that would be used in court? Like, oh, the only reason he thinks it was this person is because they had a comment on his YouTube show and he doesn't know anything about those persons, right? They can't be used against you. So that's kind of the same thing with this. It's just a tip. It's like a lie detector test, right? In this scenario here, Ann Taylor, if you replaced the lie detector test with the IgG test, she is literally trying to. All right, so this is what literally is happening. It's equivalent to Bryan Kohberger taking a lie detector test, failing that test, right? Because the IgG pointed at him and ended up being him. So that is equivalent to him failing the lie detector test. And then Ann Taylor wanting that evidence being put into evidence so then they can throw it out. You get what I'm saying? That's the same thing with this. They want to enter this into evidence that's not being used against him. So that way it can be used against him, even though it points at him and would be worse for him, in hopes that they did something wrong. And in the situation with the lie detector test, the hope would be that the person that was taking the test or administrating the test, which happens to be an FBI certified person conducting the test, did something wrong, right? That's the hope. And I mean, it's a really bad argument when you think about it on the whole there. But let's continue going back over here. Oh yeah, somebody said retiring. Chief Fry's retiring in May, from what I understand. Yeah, he's retiring in May. Let's drive around another town at 4 a.m. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. If you're driving around at 4 a.m., all right, it's 2022, so that was a 5-year-old car. In a snowy, icy place, November 9th, how many, front-wheel drive, Hyundai, other cars you're going to find in a small town like that you just so happen to drive by as well? It is what it is. All right, so yeah, this is the 19th. Here's the next day, the 20th, and this is when they say that they're aware of the Hyundai Elantra located in Eugene, Oregon, and have spoken with the owner. The vehicle was not involved, or the vehicle was involved in a collision and subsequently impounded. The vehicle is registered out of Colorado, and the female owner is not believed to have any relation to any property in Moscow, Idaho, or the ongoing murder investigation. The public is asked to stop contacting the owner. Wow. I remember that. Yeah, and apparently it had nothing to do with it. And what they did was the vehicle was impounded, and there was a VIN that they checked, and it wasn't the vehicle that they were looking for. Let's see. I thought I had it real somewhere out here where I could highlight it about that. But yeah, they had the VIN, and it was impounded, didn't come back to the vehicle. Now, if they didn't know who the owner of the vehicle was, or if they didn't know who killed the students there, and it was still up in the air, why would knowing, who the vehicle was registered to make a difference? The only reason that would make a difference is if they knew that the person that committed this crime, they knew who that person was, and they knew where or how or if the vehicle in question was registered to them. Right. So if they already knew that, who that vehicle was, and it came back to somebody in Colorado, it's not the same vehicle they're looking for. All right. So this goes back to when they found out who he was. All right, let me pull these back up quick so we can go back through some of these. What's that for? I'm just curious. Next Logic asks, do you think they'll give up the training records, or will Ann Taylor put them in the dock? It depends. I mean, it depends on what training records she's looking for, apparently she's wanting some information from a couple of people that weren't really connected to the case, from my understanding. I think one of them was one of the persons that arrived on scene, may have talked to one of the victims, one of the roommates, as a person who has assisted with people that have gone through trauma, right? Not necessarily in the capacity of a law enforcement officer trying to pull information from somebody, but as the capacity of somebody probably going through shock, right? And the other two, I think one of them was in an autopsy, and they also took tips and spoke to, I guess, people they think are witnesses. Now, these three officers, they aren't intended on being, being witnesses for the state. So they'd have to be witnesses for the defense if they're going to be brought up there. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, they would have to say based on my training and experience, and that's why they need the training and experience records. You kind of have to get to that answer. You got to get to that question, right? So like, for instance, if I was a beat cop and somebody asked me a forensic question on the stand, and I've never been through a forensic class in my life, I can't say based on my experience and training, that's what, happened. I would say I'm not trained or any of those things. So it'd have to be privileged for that, right? It'd have to be specific for the questioning, has to be specific for what you're asking. And if, for instance, these officers really didn't do anything that pertains to the case, how can you ask them something that's going to be like based on my training and experience? If they didn't do the cast, if they didn't do the IGG, if they didn't collect the sheath, if they didn't talk to Bryan Kohberger himself or any of the surviving roommates in the capacity of an interview, then I don't know. I don't know if they'll get them. I think it's just kind of pulling at straws again. So let's see. Said that to more than one perp allegedly. I don't know about that. I don't think so. I highly doubt it. Which that brings me to a thing that I had heard. I heard somebody said that I've seen or I knew what text messages were between Dylan Mortenson and Bethany Funke, and that's 100% false. How the hell would I have known or seen? You know what I mean? Not even the Goncalves family have privilege to that, and they're the ones that own the phone that Kaylee had. The only thing that they could see was, who called in, who called out stuff. They couldn't see text messages. They couldn't see any of those things. I think those type of things require a subpoena. So, no, I haven't seen those. I don't know anything about that. I know this person said that they said I said to them. I did talk to them at one point, but they are highly misinformed. You know, the statement that I have ever said when it came to text messages or anything like that was that Christy said that she had heard. Now, this is saying heard also. This isn't something that was reported to her, but she stated that she had heard that somebody, that Dylan or Bethany had called out, whether it was through the phone or verbally or text message. She wasn't sure. And that's when I asked, well, don't you have the records? And she said, yeah, no, you know, wouldn't you be able to see if there was any calls coming in or missed calls? And she said, well, now that you mentioned that, yeah, there wasn't a missed call. So it wasn't a phone call. Could it have been a verbal call out? Possibly. Could it have been a text message? Possibly. But what's on it and what is said, I have no idea. I think that News Nation had reported that Dylan and Bethany were texting each other. That wasn't me, though. That was News Nation. That was Ashley Banfield. So I don't know if you can confuse me for her, but if you do, probably need thicker glasses than I have. Let's see. You never post proof of your claims. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's not towards me. Daniel, would you ever do a 23andMe or an ancestry test? I have. I found out I'm like 2% Greek god. Just kidding. I did find out I was like 2% Greek or something like that. And Basque, I have like 1% of that. I am like 37% native to Texas and Mexico area. And then I had like, no, it wasn't that much. It was a little bit less because I think it populated to like 57% between that and Spaniard, something like that. I had some European Jew and I don't remember the other ones. It was like a list of a long of them. I don't know how true they are, but apparently it's pretty accurate. Let's see. Attending autopsies are part of ongoing training. 100%. That's the one thing that that I've been trying to explain to some folks, that just because somebody goes to an autopsy, you know, what does that mean? You know, if you're questioning his actions there, well, what did he do? What could he have done? You know, what happened? What was the result of him being at the autopsy that you think something may have occurred? Right now, I'd understand if it was the person conducting the autopsy, the pathologist, the coroner, or whoever's in there doing it. I would think that if they had some sort of like shady past, then yeah, 100%. But if it's some guy that is, you know, going because he may never been to an autopsy, especially involving a murder in the manner that they've had, you know, they had already mentioned that there hadn't been one in that area for a few years. You know, you might want to go in there and get some training done if possible. It happens, you know. I've been to one like that. I've been to a couple of autopsies, and never once was it my case or I had any part of the investigation. It was more for training purposes. And, you know, I wanted to get somewhere in the department at that time, you know, before I, you know, decided a business of my own was the better route financially. So you know, I took some of these courses and things like that, and was going to make some moves to go into being an investigator, but didn't pan out for me. All right. So I'm not saying BK is innocent. I'm trying to make a point that if there are discrepancies, it could get thrown out. Maybe it won't. Maybe. I mean, the discrepancies are going to, you know, the ones that you brought up are interesting, you know, especially when it comes up to the one where Dylan heard noises and, you know, according to the PCA, the vehicle is still being driven around at the same time. It is a concern. You know, I do know that they're using the word approximation during that time. So it may not be accurate. I also know that they had stated that, you know, the girls had gotten back at 1:45 when it was 1:56. And so we'll see, you know, how accurate those times are. Once they get into court, that's when we'll figure out exactly. Thank you, Mr. Beer. How's it going? Thanks, Daniel and Drunk Turkeys, for all you do. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Pro tip: if you have leaked photos of the crime, send them to one of the Idaho newspapers and News Nation, like the people with actual photos would do. Yeah. I've had people send me some photos of some weird stuff, and some of it is doctored and filtered and all this other things, and some of it is like it's so filtered and stuff. It's like trying to find the Virgin Mary in a tortilla or something. You know what I'm saying? Like one of those things where you can kind of see a shape in the wall and it looks like something. It's kind of like one of those type of things that I've seen. I don't know. We'll find out in trial. It is what it is. I've decided to remain. Hold on. The other one was joking. Don't know Terry. I don't know anybody. The car is a big problem from some of us perspective. Man, I missed it. I'm sorry. It kind of jumped on me. The car was a big problem. All right, here it is. From us perspective, you're much nicer to discuss this with. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I get it. The car without having DNA and stuff like that. Like I've said it from the beginning. It is a situation where it's going to be a hurdle. You would expect to see those things. Everybody said they expected to see something in that car. Now when you talk to certain people like Steve, who's a retired CSI investigator, or the medical forensic death investigator that we had on the show. If you want to catch that episode, it's on the members only. It's not aired out because of issues with her work, so to speak, but it is allowed to be on the members only, so you can go back and catch it there. But on that specific episode, she talked about how, a car could be cleaned in 7 weeks very easily if you know what you're doing. And given the knowledge that Bryan Kohberger had, it makes sense. I mean, she also mentioned that, you'd also think that the person with that amount of knowledge would also do some prepping, right? And if they prepped the car beforehand and then cleaned it afterwards, I mean, it's very plausible. And so after listening to those two individuals with much more experience and knowledge than me, I felt that it is very plausible that somebody with his experience and knowledge could have performed this crime and either limited the amount of DNA that was in his vehicle based on precautions that he may have made prior to, and also cleaning his vehicle after the fact with tools and cleaning devices that he knows won't leave evidence, right? All right. Let me go through some of these, and then I'll open up the phone lines for about 30 minutes. Hold on. So we already looked at that one with the two where you can see from the 19th to the 20th where he's look, this is also a little bit later on the 19th. Oh, this is the 29th. My bad. Dyslexia. Sorry, guys. But yeah, you can see the 19th. This is the 16th.
Students are returning home.
Look at that face.
Break. Does that present challenges for the investigation?
I think it's always a little bit of a challenge. We went through this, right after Thanksgiving and all that, but we have investigators all across the nation. We have investigators all across the state with the state police and the FBI. So we'll adapt to that and we'll continue to do our investigation.
What about investigators? Can they keep up this investigative pace over the holidays?
We will continue to keep up this pace.
And so let's find one then. Yeah. Let's go look for the one about the Elantra. See, in my opinion, I don't think that they knew that it was a 2014 to 16 Elantra also until after they got Bryan Kohberger's name. The reason being is the trip that he took, right? He took this long trip back to Pullman. And in my opinion, that was in efforts to elude the video surveillance investigation that would have been conducted to determine if the vehicle that was involved in the homicide had traveled towards Pullman immediately after the homicide at 4:20. So you would expect to have seen that vehicle entering Pullman sometime around 4:30 to 4:45. You wouldn't expect to see it at 5:36. And, given the amount of information and the amount of tips and the amount of limited resources they had to cover all those things, if you didn't see that vehicle pass by within a specific amount of time, I would assume that these police officers probably, went on about saying that it probably did not go in this direction. Now, once they got his name from the IGG, they opened up the warrants that they had when it came to the cell towers to see if they could find his phone. And sure enough, it's there. And sure enough, it disconnects at 2:47, then reconnects at 4:48. So with that, that's enough to go get his locations. You find out that he's a criminology student and he has the specific training to, that would give somebody the ability to elude the investigation. You see how well, the person that committed this crime eluded the investigation. So those things jive, right? So you get these warrants, and each one of these warrants just start checking more boxes. Boom, boom, boom. It didn't take very long from the time that they got his name to the time they arrested him, and they still had to find him, right? So, they got his name December 19th. Where was he at? He was in the Pocono Mountains. They didn't know where he was at. They had to go and rely on, and it says in the probable cause affidavit, on Colorado license plate readers and two stops by Indiana law enforcement agencies to determine that that's the direction he was heading and he was going home. They talk about that they were out there, I want to say the 24th, 23rd, somewhere around there, and they were watching him, and then they ended up taking, a sample of trash from his parents' house on the 27th. Arrested back to Idaho and got a positive match on the 28th. Arrested him on the 29th. Had they not, had he been in Moscow, Idaho, December 19th, you're looking at 5 days between the 19th and the 24th when they finally made it to the Pocono Mountains. So you're looking at 5 days faster. So you're probably looking at him getting arrested right around Christmas Eve. Had he not traveled across, across the country. So it didn't take very long. There was a lot of evidence there to point at him. Sometimes you just need to find the person. And once you do, you can work backwards. And there comes the evidence. Fortunately for law enforcement, this crime was committed in an hour when there's not usually a lot of activity out. You're not seeing a lot of vehicles driving around, things like that. And so you can identify a vehicle and follow their movements and stuff like that during this time. So I hope all that made sense. But let's watch this, and then I'll open up the phone lines. Let's do two. Let's do the December 7th one. Here it is. It's the 8th.
First, start by explaining why this search for this white vehicle.
So we have information of a white vehicle that was in the area either during the time frame of the homicide or around the time frame of the homicide, and we are just wanting to talk to the individuals who are in that vehicle. They may have some valuable information for us, and we're looking for a 2011 to a 2013 Hyundai Elantra. So any assistance you can give us, anybody that owns one, anybody that knows of someone who owns one or may have been driving one, if you could get a hold of us through our tip line or call us directly, we'd appreciate that.
This body cam image and the white car, is this the white car investigators are looking for?
So the body cam image that is out there from an officer who was on a call with alcohol offense does have a white vehicle in it. This is not the vehicle that we are looking for. So we want to clear that up with all news media.
And finally, the tip line, the process. What do you want to tell the public about that?
So the tip line now will go to an FBI call center. We've done that because we started receiving many tips, and that call center can categorize those, and they can send those tips back to investigators so we can follow up and make sure that we continue with our investigation.
So they have had a lot of tips coming in, and they're having to put it through the FBI's, they got a phone system, right? A call center system that you can go through and talk about what tip you have, and it'll categorize it for them, make it a little bit more efficient. But that's how many tips they have on December 8th. They're going through a lot. I know that a lot of people, and this goes back to when they found Kohberger or thought Kohberger was a suspect. And it goes back to that, where You know, if you think about it, they got the information on November 25th, and it took them 4 days to go out there and find the car, right? Or they located his name on November 25th, and it took 4 days for them to go locate the car. What that tells me is that Kohberger's car was one of many vehicles that they were out there looking at and that they were jotting down. The reason why we don't know that it was, the 45th Elantra of the 190 Elantras that they may have found in that vicinity is because those other 194 Elantras, those people that own it or are driving it, aren't on trial. They're not, the probable cause affidavit is strictly for Bryan Kohberger and only him alone. So all that information about who else they investigated and came up with nothing is never going to reach the light of day. Let's see. Angel, you crazy. Crazy. All right, let's go back. And I'm going to pull one more and then we'll open up the phone lines. This is the Elantra one.
Take us back when investigators first started asking for video. What sources were you asking to get video from?
Well, we started looking for video the day of the crime. Officers on scene, before I even arrived, had identified certain residences in the area that had video cameras. We know just from past experience that security cameras, doorbell cameras, and the like are very, very commonplace now. And that's a part of our standard procedure, is to start looking for a possible video source in and around crime scenes. So we started the day of the crime. And then that expanded as we got more investigators to the area for assistance, and we started putting together teams. And one of our teams' sole job was to go through the King Road area, associated neighborhoods, and eventually the main thoroughfares in the city of Moscow, trying to identify videos, video cameras, etc., and then contact those business owners, contact those residents.
So right there on this day, December 15th, they're talking about the video surveillance cameras or the video surveillance tapes that they have to this point. None of it is expanded outside of Moscow, Idaho at this point. They talked about that there was that area, and then they expanded it out a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and now it's basically through all the thoroughways through Moscow, Idaho, December 15th. So just kind of tell you how slow those things were going. So when the probable cause affidavit says that they, located the vehicle on November 25th, or they found the vehicle on the logs on 25th, located on the 29th, and then that they were given access to WSU camera footage, and that it shows this car doing this, it doesn't say what date and time that occurred or how much time had passed between the time of November 29th and the time that they did those things. I can positively probably say that we can deduce that they hadn't looked at the WSU tapes yet as of December 15th, based on what he just said.
And ask for copies of that video.
Initially, there was a particular area outlined as where the priority was for asking for video. Why was that area selected?
Well, that area was selected because essentially it surrounds the King Road area, and we know that people typically have to travel to and from. We weren't trying to pigeonhole our investigation into the suspect lives in the area. We wanted to make sure that we covered all the bases. And so as we began to gather more information, we began to expand our search area. You may recall from the second press conference that we specifically put out a plea to the public for any video in the King Road area, and then we gave a defined area, and we put that area on our website as well, asking residents, hey, if you have video or if your neighbor has video, let us know so we can get a copy of that. We understand that video has a finite life, and sometimes systems will start recording over themselves. So we started that process very, very early in the investigation.
Why ask the public for additional help with this white car?
Well, through our tips, through our leads, some of the evidence that came in, we start to identify patterns. And like we said earlier, we are confident that the occupant or occupants of that vehicle have information that's critical to this investigation.
Occupant or occupants. They really don't know how many people were in their vehicle at this time. They can't probably specify whether it was one or more at this time, right? Now they have probably, one source of DNA on the knife sheath, and they got to go back and retract things. And then, once they get a name for that person, and you go back and you follow where that person was that day up until the point where they turned their phone off, and you can see their locations. I know everybody's saying that the triangulation is 27-mile radius, this, that. They're going to use the GPS location. So that triangulation stuff was just to get the warrant so that they can use or gather the GPS stuff so they can know exactly where he was. And so, what they were doing with the cameras and the triangulation was just corroborating the fact that triangulation said he was here. Cameras pointed out, showed him that he was here. So this is why we believe that this is accurate enough to determine that he was here 12 times. We want to get warrants for his actual locations, so that way we can determine that it was indeed him, those 12 times that night, the whole 9 yards, right? So with that being said, before they knew who he was, before they can watch him on tape, they probably had no idea how many people were in that car.
We also understand that even though there's sometimes a fascination with a particular case, some people simply don't see the news and may not know that we're looking for it. So if we get the word out there, hey, maybe your neighbor has one in the garage that they don't drive very often. Maybe there's one that's just not on the registration database. Let us know. So far, we have a list of approximately 22,000 registered white Hyundai Elantras that fit into our criteria that we're sorting through. That's an awful lot of information, but it may not be all of them. So the public can help us with that.
Yeah, they sure can, and they sure did with a bunch of stuff. So let's look. I want to pull up one last thing. Let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. Oh man, I gotta change it up, switch it out. I wanted to pull up the these pictures, these images. I'll be able to bring them up next time. Of white Elantras, the 2015, the Sentra, and the Corolla. They're all very similar, especially if you're looking at profile images of the vehicle. They're all going to come out looking kind of similar. Yeah, I'm not surprised that it took him a while to figure out that it was a 2014. Let's see. Daniel, does it matter that he had more connections to law enforcement than Idaho 4? Just asking. I mean, what connection to law enforcement did he have? I mean, I hate to, I don't mean to stutter there, but like the Idaho 4 kids were just kids. They weren't in criminal justice or anything like that. I know that Kaylee was interested in criminal justice and interested in true crime and things like that. I don't understand why they would have connections to law enforcement. Bryan Kohberger was who did he have connections to? He had emailed the chief of police trying to be an intern for the Pullman Police Department. And he had applied there. And I think that might be the extent of his connections to law enforcement in that area. And he'd only been there for a few months. He needed his father to ask for people to be his friends. So it didn't seem like he was very social or had, was a very social person. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what connections he had, but even if he had a connection to law enforcement, how does that, make him the prime person of being a fall guy or something? I mean, where does, hey, let's, we got these murders, we have to, find somebody to blame this on. Let's blame Bryan because we know who he is. He has a white Elantra, and and then we're going down the evidence. Let's blame Bryan because he's what? Why blame him? If he's an innocent guy and not doing anything, why blame Bryan? Is it because he's an outsider? Well, so was the officer that was investigating him. And so are like 20,000 kids in that area. I don't get it. I don't get why you look at people applying for jobs in the neighboring police department for suspects in a quadruple homicide to use as a patsy or a fall guy, when you have a database of people that you've arrested for numerous amounts of crimes and some more heinous than others that you can easily pin it on. And that would make more sense. A Seagulls comes in with a $220 super chat. Wow, thank you. Maybe BK was passing by. The killer saw him. BK understood that he saw him. BK turned off his phone not to be tracked. Maybe that's why he acted weird later. The gloves, questions about the case, leaving the town, etc. I mean, here's the thing about that. And I understand it. Maybe he got scared. But he didn't leave town right away. He waited a month to leave town. That's one thing. Two, if, his career path, he wanted to be a detective. In fact, there was a student that came forward, not a student, an acquaintance of his that came forward and spoke to the media. He was a friend of Bryan Kohberger's when Bryan Kohberger used to consume heroin. And he mentioned that he was talking to Bryan Kohberger through text messages, and he had the text messages to show. And I can't remember which news station aired this, but he basically had stated that during Thanksgiving and Christmas time, or during the Thanksgiving holidays, he had indicated to him that he had wanted to be involved in a high profile crime, that he wanted to solve them. He wanted to be the detective that was in charge of those kind of cases. And he also expressed that it would be difficult to do so, because those cases, take a lot of time and work and things like that, to be those type of detectives or special agents, to be in those situations. And, if he's that kind of person and he's willing to, he wants to be involved and he wants to help, if he saw something remotely illegal, why not report it? Why not go forward and say, hey, this is what happened? I understand, especially him who understands criminology, understands criminal laws and things like that, rules, regulations, what you're supposed to say, or standard operations and procedures when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to reporting a crime. He should be well aware and versed in all of that, probably better than some of the police officers that are, working in the area. And I can guarantee you not very many of them have a master's degree or a PhD. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate the donation. That is awesome. Thank you so much. I know you came in with a second one, I think, right? Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you so much. A Seagull comes in with another $220 super chat saying, because he was passing by, maybe he was really out and driving at that time. Maybe he was really passing by. That's Turkish lira. Lyra. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. I apologize. So if he was passing by, I don't think that he, given, who he was as far as his major, what he wanted to do in life, and the fact that he went to school or work, proceeding afterwards, and really didn't change anything. I mean, he left out of town, but it was a month later. I don't think he would have seen anything. Right. So his excuse would have been, he was just passing by. It's possible, but how does his DNA get on the sheath inside of the house? He's just passing by. And to his own admission, he was by himself. So it's not like, he was out with anybody else or anything like that. They could have gotten his DNA and gotten, it on the sheet. And I know some people might say, well, maybe he was out there doing something he wasn't supposed to and doesn't want to get in trouble, like maybe perhaps snorting cocaine with a security guard, and then the security guard goes out there and does it. Well, I mean, right now he's in a hell of a lot of trouble, right? His life is on the line. I think that if I was him and any other person in that same situation, would rather cop out to snorting cocaine than be in trial for a quadruple homicide. And I use that as an example because I've actually heard that as a explanation, as to what he was doing. I'm going to open up the phone lines for about 30 minutes. Let me open those out right now. Hold on. Boom. And let me adjust this real quick so that way things are out There we go. All right, so take that off. Give me 1 second, y'all. I gotta pull this up. All right, so the phone lines are open. You guys are ready to rock and roll. You can call in 210-209-9435. Oh, geez. Hold on. There it is. I'm having so much freaking problems with this thing. I need like a fourth screen or something. So yeah, anybody want to call in, hit us up. We'll listen to what you have to say. We'll have you on for about 3 minutes or so. And then we'll go on to the next person. Yeah, some folks are saying this is a longer show than normal. Yeah, well, to be honest with you guys, the shows had been, shortened because there was a time issue with, and scheduling issues with some of the other guys. So now that it's just myself for the most part, especially on Wednesdays, Blue will be back probably on Friday, and most Mondays he'll be on. But he has a scheduling issue as well. So on those nights that I don't have to worry about time and schedules, we can go on a little bit longer. I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope that's not a problem. If you guys prefer the smaller or shorter versions of the shows, let me know. I'm here to entertain you guys. Is there any evidence of BK having a biohazard suit at all? I don't know if there's evidence that he had a biohazard suit per se. Oh, that's loud. Biohazard suit per se. 1 second. If you don't mind muting the background. But
yes.
I don't know if there was anything like that, but they did have some Dickie clothes that were supposedly purchased by him, and that they can't, find. So maybe that's what he uses, those coveralls. 281, you're on the air. Who are we speaking with? How's it going?
Steph C.
Hey, Steph, how's it going? I know we've been trying to get you on for a while.
Yeah. So, my major issue with this is a lot of people keep focusing on, like, a lot of the different little minutiae. Well, he could have been passing by. He could have been this. He could have been that. The thing is his DNA is on the knife sheath. Only one person could have done this crime, even though, people can sit there and say, well, there could have been a second person, but that doesn't make sense in this particular case. You don't typically take a knife in to kill 4 people. It would normally just be like one. Then I don't want to be graphic on the show, but the knife, you can have significant issues with a knife if you go in like that. So it's obvious that the other people were just collateral damages, witnesses. So he only went in that house for one person. He didn't go in for all 4 of those people. He went in to kill her, I believe, whether that be Maddie or Kaylee. I'm on the fence of which one I think that is. It changes from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely, I feel like he only went in to kill one person, and then it just went kind of downhill from there. But I really get upset when I hear people talk about like Bryan Kohberger and all that, and there's just no evidence of that. There's just no evidence of it. And Bryan Kohberger is an American hero who had a traumatic brain injury and PTSD and had other issues, going on. And I feel like people need to let him rest in peace and just be done with that and accept that it could be, that it could be Bryan Kohberger. He's innocent until proven guilty, but I feel like the evidence against him, is very high. And I feel like even though it could have its holes, it still doesn't mean he didn't do it. It's the totality of the circumstances that need to be looked at. I mean, and we often just talk about the Moscow evidence. We don't talk about the evidence that Pennsylvania has very often. I mean, I know you bring it up sometimes, and I'm not saying it's you that's not bringing up the Pennsylvania evidence. It's just I'm saying it's nobody seems to be considering that evidence. You know, everybody just wants to say Moscow didn't do this, Moscow didn't do that, the FBI didn't do this, and it's like, no. When you look at the totality of it, it's Bryan Kohberger. I'm sorry if that offends people, but it is. Sorry.
What evidence did they get in Pennsylvania? I'm just curious.
Well, they were talking about the knives. There was a whole list of it. Which doesn't mean that those were the knives that were involved in the crime. I feel like the knife was at one time in Blaine. But the shovels, all the stuff. That was just in his car, all the black clothing. They saw him. There's one point they saw him creeping at a house. The surveillance team, they had mentioned that. There was also, just the gloves, the evidence, like you said earlier, that he pulled out the trash, the fact that he was cleaning his car. I know a lot of that's circumstantial, but sometimes circumstantial cases turn out to be the best cases with the jury, because it's like, if you have just regular evidence and everything, people can sort of poke holes in that, but a jury can go, well, that doesn't make sense. That, like, say for instance, Scott Peterson, that he's saying he's somewhere else, but he's, I'm in Paris and so forth, and on, and he's saying this when that's obviously not the case. Jurors look at that and say, well, they're called thought prints, and they're like, that doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense. He's lying, and so sometimes circumstantial evidence makes for the best evidence. But of course, you always want physical hard evidence, and I feel like they have it, and definitely in Moscow, but also, in Pennsylvania. I mean, what's the note to his father? What is the underlying passage in the book? What is all that? I mean, clearly these are, trained police officers that are looking into this evidence. They wouldn't have collected it if they didn't feel that it had value, or it pointed to the fact that, they've implicated him in this. And see, there's no gag order in Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania officials are not talking, and that's good. But I mean, we don't often discuss that evidence, and I really feel like that there's a treasure trove there, but people want to just seem to focus on, oh, well, he could have been driving around, and he could. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, and everybody has the right to their own opinion, but I mean, it's like I don't understand the whole wanting to make him innocent when clearly it doesn't appear that he is.
Right.
So
no, I understand that. I mean, there's, I think a lot of it is, somebody being innocent until proven guilty, I think, is the biggest aspect to when people look at it. And I do think that, whether you're for or against a certain situation, if you get emotionally involved, you can get those blinders on, and it doesn't matter what information's out there, whether you're wanting to go one direction or the other. It can be hard to see through those blinders. Now, you mentioned the evidence that they have in Pennsylvania. I just want to be accurate and make sure that everybody has the correct stuff. The knife that was found is not believed to have been the murder weapon. They collected the knife. Right. They collected a knife sheath, which obviously if he left the knife sheath to the murder weapon at the house, then, those sheaths weren't involved in the murder, or at least to our knowledge. And so, I think that that's a huge thing about that. But when it comes to what evidence they possibly do have out of there, I think the biggest part is the fact that, his behavior, you have the gloves, it's been suspicious. It's been reported that it was so suspicious that his family had a dinner reservation made at a place, and it's been proven to be real. I saw I can't remember if it was Daily Mail or somebody else, but they actually got the actual picture
Reservation
of the reservation where it said that they wanted a dim lighted area. And that is supposedly when, a lot of the conversations and accusations towards BK about his involvement in the Idaho murders occurred. Whatever those statements that might come out of his family might be detrimental towards Bryan Kohberger. There was the fact that they found ID cards. Now, I don't think that any of those ID cards perhaps had anything to do with the victims at the 1112 or 1122 residence. However, shortly after those cards were found, a report was circulating through major news media from sources. And I believe that these sources were probably the Pennsylvania Police Department, because they're also the same ones that said that sources said that, Bryan Kohberger's sister may have had some comments. So, shoot, where was I going with that? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, I've been kind of a little bit all over the place myself,
Right.
but that's just because I have a lot to say about,
I remember where I was
this
at.
case.
So the ID cards.
But go ahead.
Yeah. So the sources came back saying that apparently there was a female who had her house broken into, and that she was an acquaintance of Bryan Kohberger's, and nothing was taken, just some things were moved around, and that Bryan Kohberger advised her to get security cameras, and he ended up installing them for her. They believe that he may have been responsible for the initial break-in, and that after he installed those cameras, that he was watching this female through her camera system, because he had passwords and stuff like that. I don't believe in coincidences. So you have ID cards that are found, and then you have that report. That leads me to believe that they probably found the ID card of that acquaintance in Bryan Kohberger's possession when he shouldn't have had it. And they're probably thinking that he took it when the initial break-in, not while nobody was there, instead of when he was installing the cameras, where I assume, his acquaintance was there watching him and probably conversating with him.
Well, the question to me that needs to be asked in that, though, is how did they find out he was monitoring her and all that? How did they find that out, to begin with? I mean, I'm saying this because it's like, were they going through evidence in this case, the Moscow case, and then they came along it, because it seems like that she didn't know it was occurring until they let her know.
Right.
And then she was like, "Oh, I had a break-in, and I had a break-in, and then this happened." Or what did it? Or was it like after the fact, after Bryan Kohberger was arrested, and she said, "Well, this happened," and then maybe that led to it. But I'm just kind of curious as like how they figured that out. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ID cards probably played a role in that. They probably contacted this lady and informed her, and she probably told them that, "Oh my God, I had a break-in. He's the one that installed my cameras." There's probably if somebody's logging in from somewhere else into that system, there's probably some sort of marker within that, within that system that says that somebody logged in from a different IP address.
Yeah, very, very possible. Very possible. But I mean, so do they know that it was her ID though that was found in Pennsylvania? I don't want to take up too much time on the phone. I want to give other people a chance. But do they know that it was her ID or?
Not to my knowledge. I'm just putting two and two together myself. Just saying that, if they find these ID cards, and then shortly after this story comes up about him, possibly breaking into somebody's house, moving things around, and then installing the security cameras to said house or apartment. I feel that, I think that there's a connection there. Yeah,
very possible. Very possible. Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but I think a lot of people just sensationalize this. I mean, the media has sensationalized this case so much, and they make him into like, oh, is he a serial killer? Is he this? Is he that? I actually think he was going to be a budding SA'er. I don't want to say the term because I don't want to. Right. That's what I think he was. But I think this happened because, well, I don't want to get into the whole theory of it because it takes too much time. But I mean, I think that the actual murder, I'm sorry, I don't know if I should say that either, but that was kind of secondary to his plan. And one thing that, and then I'll let you go because I don't want to take too much time, but I really feel that originally that some of the evidence may have been placed in Blaine, and the reason that I believe that is there was this lady on the news, and she was talking about how she lived like in like some cabins in the woods back there, and after the murders, her dog was barking for like 10 or 15 minutes just at that time of the morning, and it really scared her. And then when the phone pings came up, it showed that he was supposedly in that area. So, but they never refer back to that lady or anything like that. Not to say they haven't talked to her or interviewed her. They may have interviewed her and we just don't know that. But I think initially he put the stuff in Blaine. Now he probably took it somewhere else at a later date. But I feel like in Blaine is where he, temporarily placed that evidence. So,
interesting.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or what have you. I'm sorry. I wish I could have articulated myself a little bit better tonight, but
no, you're fine.
I'm, but because I just have so much to say about this, but
right.
I just have a lot.
So as far as anything being found in Blaine, I don't think so. And the reason being is if you go to the PCA, it states that he exited Pellis River and Drive, and that road goes directly towards Pullman, Washington, and they suspect that was the road that he had taken, and which confused me because when his phone turns on, he's on Highway 95 South near Blaine, Idaho, and I thought to myself, well, why would they be thinking he's going that direction if they have him over here at, when his phone turns on? And I thought to myself that, well, maybe this was part of the report that was added later. And then I started thinking, well, they thought he went the other direction. Why would they think he went the other direction? So I went and looked on Google Earth, and if you put the, right there on that intersection of 95 South and Paulus River Drive, there's security cameras there. So I don't think he went that direction. Now, if you go the opposite direction towards Pullman, you can turn off the right, probably about 7 miles. No, not 7, maybe about 4 miles down the road. And then you turn left, I'm sorry, if you're heading towards Pullman. And then you can do this big old loop around that brings you right back on Highway 95, probably around the area where his phone turned on, because it seems like that's the area. I have it on Google Earth. I have it on another video. I'll see if I can go find it or see if it's still on my Google Earth. But there are some roads that will take him all the way back around 95. And the reason why he probably did that is strictly because one, it's very quiet out there. There's no vehicles, no nothing. So he's probably a good place to drop something. And two,
right.
He's getting around that camera. So officers don't, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the surveillance camera in the neighborhood and see him leaving southbound. And he has two directions he can travel. He can either go left or right. And left has a camera and he's not there. Right goes to Pullman, and cameras in Pullman aren't picking him up. So in my opinion, he had to have turned off at that point right there and did this whole loop around south of the to get out of the camera's view, and it worked. I mean, they police were confused. They had no idea where he was at. They didn't start looking outside of Pullman, Washington until December, until they got his name, to be honest with you. But I remember that the first time that we got word that they were looking at a different city was when that picture came up. I want to say it was like maybe the 14th or the 15th from the gas station. And it was at 3:45 a.m. picture of a white vehicle traveling, and the direction that it was traveling from, if it was coming directly from that area, would have been an area that was they would have been coming from out of town. And so at that point, they started to open up their investigation going that way out of town. And so, you know, that told me at that time that they believed that the person that committed this crime was still in Pullman or still in Moscow. And then once they moved it out of there, that's when I thought that they probably have ran out or exhausted all leads in Moscow, Idaho, and are out moving outward, which it seems to be accurate.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to keep y'all. I know there's probably other callers calling in. As much as I would love to continue this discussion, I guess I should let somebody else. But
yeah, no problem. I appreciate you coming in. I'm sorry we couldn't get this, going through, yesterday during the members only live, which I want to tell you guys that members only live. If you're not a member and you want to catch that show, you'll be able to watch it tomorrow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get podcasts. It should be on sometime around noonish tomorrow. I did the members only live, and that's kind of how things go. We'll do the members only live typically on Sunday, and then on Tuesday it'll air out on those other platforms. Unless you're a member, you won't be able to participate in the live showing. That is a perk for the members. If you want to be a member, just click the link in the description for join, and you'll be there. But thank you, Steph. I appreciate you coming on and giving us your insight. It was awesome.
Thanks. I mean, I have, more to say about that investigation, but I'll call another time.
All right. Sounds good. Maybe we can set up something. We can go through it. You have a good one.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Phone lines are open again. We got probably about maybe one more caller. So, give me a sec. I can't read this. I had to shrink my screen there. It says, Bond Girl says, another break-in occurred in that same apartment after BK was arrested. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of crimes that have occurred after BK was arrested for a lot of things. Just because BK is arrested and he was thought to have been committed one crime, months earlier, doesn't mean that no other crime is ever going to be committed in that area again. So, I mean, I think that in time, one day, and it's unfortunate, but you're probably going to see another homicide in Moscow. And if BK is found guilty of his crimes and in jail, he didn't commit it. You know what I mean? So I get it. There was another break-in there afterwards, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that break-in that occurred after the fact had anything to do with the break-in that sources have indicated that Bryan Kohberger may have been involved in. Let's see. I personally know the Idaho detectives know he is innocent, but it's too late to admit it. Okay. That's cool. Let's see. Circumstantial evidence has to be consistent with other testimony and evidence. And that's true. And I think it does. You have Bryan Kohberger, who's suspected of committing this crime, right? You have his phone off during that specific time of the incident. But prior to his phone turning off, you have him on camera moving through Pullman, and you have his phone locations on so you can synchronize those together and basically deduce that those vehicles were the same, at least up to the point where he turned his phone off, right? So that puts him out and about, which is probably the reason why, he had to notify police, law enforcement that his alibi was he was driving around alone. I'm sure if there was nothing pointing to him driving around, he probably would have said he stayed at home. But you have that aspect. You have a vehicle matching his out there. You have Dylan seeing somebody that matches his description, which is very vague, but it doesn't exclude Kohberger. It's not of a person that's 5'5", female, and 100 or 240 pounds. It's somebody that describes his height and weight, which doesn't necessarily mean he's guilty. It just doesn't exclude him. Now, what can corroborate that the person that Dylan saw was in fact Bryan Kohberger, and that's the DNA left in the house. So she saw a guy that looks like Kohberger, and now there's DNA of Kohberger in the house. That kind of, corroborates that piece of evidence right there, in my opinion. So it all kind of goes together, in my opinion. Some people just don't want to see it, Let's see. It's a presentation of case of. Oh, it's a presentation, a case of 4 counts of murder. I find it hard to believe that they could not get his DNA sample before the IgG. He wasn't wearing gloves driving his car during the traffic stops. He was not wearing gloves. Yeah, it's kind of funny that he wasn't wearing gloves beforehand. In the traffic stops also, he was in his own vehicle. He did have gloves in his, I think on his lap in one of the traffic stops in Indiana. But you find it hard that they could not get his DNA. I mean, when they found out who he was December 19th, right? And he was already gone by that time. He wasn't in Moscow. So they had to go get his DNA from Pennsylvania. It took them 3 days to get, enough of a sample or whatever. Maybe they just couldn't find any of his because, like the reports have stated, he was putting his trash in individual baggies and taking them other places. But anyways, if he was doing all those things, I don't understand why it would be difficult to understand why they couldn't get his DNA. DNA doesn't transfer as easy as people think, to be honest with you. Because if it did, then you would have found DNA of his everywhere. The fact that it didn't also kind of tells you how hard it really is for it to transfer from one place to another. It's not that easy, as, like I said, people think. Especially if it's like single source. Now, if it's a mixture DNA, then yeah, it's probably, his possibility has been transferred around. But a single source DNA, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any calls in yet. I'll be hanging this up in about 4 minutes. 8 minutes is not 8 minutes is not planned unless you're a ninja. I mean, I don't think it was 8 minutes, right? There's the Linda Lane footage, and there's other footage of other creators that have driven around that apartment complex. Whoa, that's loud. Let me answer this. What is up, 210? You're on the air. Who are we speaking with?
Oh, this is Jesse.
What's up, Jesse? How's it going?
Oh, good. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Just here. What's going on? What's
I
in your
hear
mind?
you. Oh, well, it doesn't have anything to do with Bryan Kohberger. So I was trying to go at the end of the stream so I didn't interrupt anybody who wanted to share in. But I'm local to San Antonio, and I wanted to, I guess, just kind of share some stuff for the listeners who have never walked into like a crime scene before. And I'm not a cop. I'm not anything like that. I'm just a regular person who long time ago, 20 years ago, accidentally walked into a crime scene, and what that looks like and smells like. And I don't know, maybe that's inappropriate, but
no, carry on.
Well, let's see, I'm 42 now, but when I was like 22 years old, I was working like from a temporary service to be a maintenance worker. Mm-hmm. And I went to this place off of 410 and Starcrest, like here in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm, I'm familiar.
And it was called Town Oaks. Yeah, I went to Town Oaks, and so I was only there for like a week, and the lead maintenance guy that was there was like, hey man, here's the keys, here's this. He was showing me around, showing me how to fix things and stuff real quick. And so then I had the whole place. He quit, and then I had the whole place to like take care of myself. There was no property manager, there's no leasing agents, there's no other maintenance people. It's just me. So I just kept going to work. And one day I get up to this apartment, man, and I walk in, and it's a smell that I've never like experienced ever in my life before or after that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't recognize it, but it was like a rusty, like sweet smell. Mm-hmm. And I walk in, but I don't know that it's blood. And so that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to tell people who are we can all watch true crime things and we can think we recognize things when we see them, but like maybe you don't. And I walked in and it wasn't like as red as you think it would be. It's hard to describe, but the smell was there all over the countertops, on the carpet, back rooms. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is not, I didn't think it was blood. I know that it is, but then I didn't. And I'm thinking to myself, 20 something years old. And I'm like, okay, well, I just need to do my job. I'm supposed to resurface the countertops. I'm supposed to, like do a make ready. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the line of work I was in. So I get in there and start doing that. And it doesn't occur to me that as the rest of the, there's no lights. This is an old place, man. It's a retirement community. It's very old. I just started in the kitchen, was resurfacing the countertops, getting all of this reddish, brownish, purplish stuff off. And then I work my way into the rest of the house. It's all over the carpet. It's in the bathtub. It's everywhere. And it took me a little while. I'm ashamed. I've never told anybody this. I'm so ashamed because I didn't even know that like I was covering up a crime scene, if that makes sense.
Well, we'll keep it between me and you, my man.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Yeah. I didn't know, it's like, I get it. People calling opinions or nobody knows, but man, it's something. If you're not, how it is. If you're not used to living that life, you're not used to seeing things like that. There's something about a regular person. There's doubt. You just go, it can't be that. There's no way that it's that,
Yeah.
Your gut is telling you something, but you're like, nah, man, you're just being silly. This is jelly. Somebody is trashy. They just didn't clean up their house. This is jelly. And that's what I thought it was, man. I thought it was some kind of weird jelly stuff. I don't know. There's no way that I would have thought that it was what it was. And when I got into the rest of the house and saw what it was, then I knew, and I got the heck out of there. And the crazy thing was, like I said, nobody else worked there. And so we finally got a new manager, and I told her, I was like, I think I may have gone into a unit and started to fix it. And I think somebody might have got killed there.
Dang. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was just like, stay out of there. No problem. But yeah, man, anyway, maybe that's not something that should be put on YouTube Live.
Yeah, I mean, it's true though. If you're not in that world, right? The naiveness, it does play a factor in it, to think that this wouldn't happen to me. I mean, it happens in every situation. I mean, that's typically the first thing that people say when something happens to them, whether it's an illness or a crime or whatever the case may be, is, I never thought this would happen to me. And
right.
And so, that's one of the major components. What time of year was this that you found the
I want to say this was probably summer, like probably midsummer San Antonio, because I'm in San Antonio. You know how that is. So probably like June, July, if I remember correctly, and it was hot. Yeah. There was no AC on in that unit. It was like most of this place, these people had moved out. It was an old community, like I say, retirement community.
Yeah.
And the stench was high. I have actually never come upon a dead body.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't recognize that right off. And there was nobody in that unit.
Yeah.
But I guess it was the aftermath of such, right? Yeah. And so I didn't know. And I just had no clue. And it was, exactly. I just had no idea. So for me, I was like, I just want to call in because, I get it. Like, even me, there's a lot of things I still haven't experienced, but I just wanted other people to know when they're questioning or they're not sure, like, well, how is this and how is that? They don't know. And I would say, listen, like, even me being naive 20 years ago, I walked into something and I was ready to turn the unit out and sell it to somebody else. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, because, I was naive and I didn't know what that smell was. You know,
Yeah.
there was no body in there. It was just the blood. And I was like, oh, this isn't blood. It can't be, right?
Yeah.
And so it's easy to, I guess I just want to let people know it's very easy to make those mistakes. And like you said, that's the truth. You don't think this happens to you. You don't think this is your life. It's hard to know that. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I've, you know, I was trained and stuff like that. So I've knew what I was looking for, but there's been so many times where I've gone to a place where something is happening and people are just blinded by the fact that they think that it can't happen to them. You know,
Right.
I've had situations where, well, this is something kind of similar to what you had, and it didn't have anything to do with, I don't think nobody was in a homicide. Somebody passed away due to alcoholism. And if anybody knows anybody who's an alcoholic, that liver goes out and they get this disease, they start bleeding from everywhere, and it starts getting on everything. And, you know, there was one time I walked into a scene like that, and I thought it was a homicide. It had to be a homicide. You know, some blood on the walls, ceiling, you know, things like that. And no, it was an alcoholism type of thing with the liver. Craziness, man. I've never seen something like that. But
yeah.
So, you know, if it was an old person's home, I would have looked in to see if maybe perhaps somebody that passed away and recently in there that was an alcoholic, because it sounds a lot like that, you know. But then again, I mean, somebody could have easily been taken out, but old person home is. Did you see any holes in the wall or anything?
Yeah, well, it's actually, you know, not such a good side of town. A lot of drugs over there. Yeah, well, I mean, it's retirement community, not necessarily old person's home, but it just seems like a lot of people that live there nowadays, it's older people.
Gotcha.
But it's such a rundown place. I mean, you know, because we're both at the same, you know, work in the same city.
Yeah.
Like 410 and Starcrest is not exactly, you know, like the best area.
I used to work at
young people can live there. They can. I shouldn't have said that, but I guess it's just mostly all I saw was older people, you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're not watched or observed. They're just like a regular apartment complex. They do what they want and whoever, but yeah, it just seems like mostly older people. They don't have a lot of money, you know, they're on disability or whatever, but yeah, lots of broken windows, lots of boarded up windows. Well, you know how it is. I mean, just certain areas affected by drugs, and that's kind of what I figured, but who knows? I don't know. I can't say. It's speculation. That was a long time ago. All I know is once my boss, oh, you've got to leave that alone. You've got to get out of there. Yeah. And I was like, oh, and then it really set in, and I was like, oh my God, this is the first time in my entire life that I consider myself living a very blessed life. I live out in the country. I'm like southeast of San Antonio. I live out in the woods. I've never experienced anything like that before, but it makes me naive in that way. You know, it's like a good thing, but also I don't know. And so anyway, I appreciate what you do. And, thanks for educating everybody and keeping us in the loop. We need to know. It helps us keep safe. So
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for calling in, and hope to see you sometime, neighbor. It'd be great. You know, we do some things here and there in San Antonio. Keep posted, and maybe we'll see you around here and there. But yeah.
Oh yeah, would love to help out. Thank you, Daniel.
No problem, my man. You have a good night.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
That was a great caller. I'm gonna go ahead and shut down the phone line real quick. So I had this question up here. It said 8 minutes is not planned unless you're a ninja. And I wanted to answer this one. And the reason being is, you know, Bryan Kohberger could run a mile in 6 minutes. I think he had it at 6 minutes and 2 seconds on his running app. Now, I don't know if that was full on sprint or if that was just him jogging, if that was a lap that he was accustomed to doing. You know, I'll tell you this, when I was 28 years old, I could run a mile shorter than 6 minutes, and not be fully exerted. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's a good run. It's a damn good run. But if a person can run a mile in less time than the 8 minutes that you're talking about, I don't understand where this whole ninja aspect comes in. You know, you have 4 people. From the sounds of it, they were all consuming alcohol throughout the night. From the sounds of it, at least 2 of them were asleep, if not 3 of them. The only one that does sound like they were awake at the time was Xana. And, you know, you have somebody that is walking, you know, if they park in behind, you know, the residence and they're walking up to the house, maybe 45 feet away, 35 feet away from where you park to the entrance of that sliding glass door. You know, I don't know how long it takes you guys to walk that distance, but it shouldn't take more than a few seconds. Then he made entry into the house and went upstairs. He walked through the kitchen. Now, this house was relatively small. You know, I've talked to some people that have been to that area, and they said that the one thing that you notice about it is 3 stories, but it's all compact. You know, this is a rental property. It's not, you know, meant to be a luxurious home or things like that. It's, you know, a house for students to rent out. So, you know, go time yourself. How long would it take for you in your house that's probably larger than what the kitchen is in this house? How long would it take you to walk from the, you know, one side to the other? If it takes you more than 5 seconds, you're lying. You know what I mean? You know, there was some stairs there. There was probably about 6 stairs going one way, and then it turned, and then 6 stairs going up the backside of it, right? Then it was up and then turn and then up again, right? How long does it take somebody to walk that? Like, honestly, think about that. So, you know, if he parks, you know, the door's unlocked and he's able to walk in and walk straight up there. From the time that he parks to the time that he's entering into Madison's room is probably about 30 seconds. Now, a knife is very quick. I don't know how slow people think he's swinging, but you can put a couple of solid strikes within a matter of seconds and then move over to the next. I mean, he could have been in and out of that room within a minute and a half. And I think that might be even longer than what it probably was, to be honest with you. Then he goes back downstairs, goes to the second room, does the same in there. You know, I think that based on the information that I know, I feel that the door was left open, the sliding glass door. I think that Xana probably felt the breeze and or heard the noises that Dylan was hearing and got out to investigate, saw that the back sliding glass door was open, said out loud, I think someone's here, turned around to walk back towards her boyfriend who was asleep. And Kohberger came up behind her as she's entering into the door, incapacitates her, attacks the boyfriend, and then finishes off Xana after he's done. Now, in that process, I feel that Dylan did yell out something. He heard it. You know, he was probably tunnel vision doing what he was doing. You know, how many times have somebody, when you're in the process of doing something, somebody just kind of yell out something at you? You may not have been, you know, prepared to receive a message, so you don't catch the first part of it. And so what most people do is say, what, huh? Can you say that again? That's a natural response. And so, you know, Bryan Kohberger wasn't expecting somebody to yell out, and somebody did. He may not have heard what was actually yelled out. And could he take the chance that what was yelled out wouldn't get him caught, right? Was it somebody saying, I'm calling police? Was it somebody saying, get out of here? Was it, you know, somebody calling the police already? You know, he came from behind, you know, from the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive, which is right directly behind the police station. And from the time that it took him to get from the police station to the front of the King Road residence was a little bit over a minute. And that wasn't running code or running with lights and sirens or stuff. So if somebody called in police, there's a good chance that somebody's at that door within a minute. So I think that Bryan Kohberger knew and understood that and left immediately when he heard somebody yell, went outside, changed his clothes. It doesn't take very long to jump out of coveralls and slip on shoes. It's pretty easy. You know, maybe I'll do a demonstration or something like that. But 8 minutes in that amount of time, yeah, I think that's plenty of time. And again, you know, I have a little bit more experience than most. I was a police officer for some time, and I've been in a situation where I was in fights for 4 or 5 minutes, or in altercations, or you know, in situations where multiple people were fighting, and the fight was on for 4 or 5 minutes. That's a long freaking time when you're in that moment, you know. I don't know. Maybe people think that one Mississippi is an entire minute or something. I don't know. Let's see. One more, maybe two. Call it show. That's the thing. BK isn't shouting from the rooftop that he's innocent. Not once has he been shouting and insisting he's innocent. He's done, and he knows it, in my opinion, playing it out to the end. Yeah, I think he did it too. What's the last 4 digits of what? Yeah, please hit the like and subscribe button. Why would I want to touch my shoulder for half a second? Just to see if I can? I mean, is there a logical explanation that you can think of that would explain why BK separated his trash and put it into the neighbor's trash cans? I mean, obviously, to to hide his DNA, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if he was, throwing a small amount of bleach inside of one of those plastic bags and swiveling it around in the trash as well, to eliminate any DNA that's in there. When somebody's going to that extent to not disclose their DNA, it's usually for a reason. You know what I mean? Can I explain what single source DNA is? That means that it's just one person's DNA. It's not mixed with anybody else's. It is his DNA. Typically when you have like transfer DNA that was transferred from one spot to another, you'll probably get a mixture of DNA, meaning that there was more than one person's DNA mixed within that single profile. So the fact that they found single source DNA means that, nobody else, whoever put that DNA there was either Bryan Kohberger or somebody wearing gloves that just so happened to have Bryan Kohberger's DNA on them and none of their own. All right. They had his DNA on their person, but none of their own to transfer it onto the knife sheath. I mean, what are the chances of that a person has somebody else's DNA on their person that gets on a sheath, but none of their own DNA on their person can get on the sheath? And I would assume that, the person who, dressed or got dressed in the that day would have touched those pieces of articles of clothing. If the knife sheath would have touched his clothing, you would assume that if there was his DNA on his clothing, then, there should be a transfer there. But it's not. The only DNA that's on there is Bryan Kohberger's. So, it's interesting. The DNA is not a match. Whoa. Wasn't it like 5.8 octillion million trillion? You have to go to like 3, parallel universes and another galaxy to find somebody that it could have else been. It definitely was a match, my man. The STR profile that was created from the knife sheath was matched to Bryan Kohberger's by several octillion million percentile after his arrest. There's images, reports of it. The state has released it. We've all seen it. My DNA is a swing in the park. I didn't touch that child, I swear. Right. I mean, I get it. Right. But like, you might say that, hey, my DNA is in a park. I didn't touch no child, I swear. My DNA transferred from that place to another place because we're at the same location. Right. But Bryan Kohberger was by himself that night, by his own admission, in his own car. Right. He wasn't at the corner club or any of those places where the victims were. Could he have been at the same location where the killer was? Well, unless the killer was in his car, which very much well could have been driving, then how does the DNA get, his DNA get there? And then you also have to ask is like, well, it's one thing to have your DNA, in one place, but it's also another thing to have a vehicle that matches yours in the vicinity on camera, to have, your phone off at the same time that the murders are happening. And that when they look at your locations later, you'd been following or what appears to be stalking the house on 12 other occasions. Turn that off. I don't understand why it came on. We're not going to be taking any more calls today, guys. So, there's more than just the DNA evidence. You know what I mean? All righty, guys, I'm out of here. I appreciate. Wait, whoa! I almost forgot this. Sirius Black comes in with a $5 super chat. Says, "Why separate garbage in Ziploc bags and put in the neighbor's trash can? Can you give me a logical reason?" Oh, logical reason. A logical reason as to why somebody would do that. That's a good question. I'll be honest with you. I don't know of any logical reason. Maybe somebody can come up with one in the chat. If you have one, email it to me because I'm going off here pretty soon. But even if you weren't connected to a homicide, and let's just say it was just completely random, why would somebody bag their trash separately and put it in somebody else's trash can? I mean, your natural response could be something like, well, putting it in separate bags is some sort of OCD thing. But how does touching somebody else's trash lid coincide with somebody with OCD or have some kind of germophobia? Really doesn't, right? So I find that to kind of contradict itself. I don't have any logical explanation. Maybe somebody else does. It's not like he was separating glass from plastic. That's hilarious. I love this one. BK has nice birthing hips. I will say this about that. That is from a show or from a movie. It's Johnny Depp. He's a vampire. Dark Shadows. He talks about birthing hips. But alrighty, guys. I'll be back probably maybe tomorrow. We'll see what's up. But the members only show that came out yesterday will be on tomorrow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you find your podcasts. With that being said, I'm out of here, guys. We'll see you next time.